S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 Heart of Chernobyl is simultaneously everything I ever wanted it to be and everything I feared it might become. Despite the problems I've had with the game, it is maybe my favorite game of 2024. Granted, in terms of major releases, the competition isn't exactly fierce. It's a beautiful but deeply flawed experience. It suffers from many of the modern day problems in the gaming industry, as well as problems the series itself has had in the past. At the same time, it manages to circumvent some of the worst issues we see in games today. Now, I've been called a stalker before, but that isn't related to my love of the original Stalker games. I recently did a rapid fire review of them that I'll link in the description if you want to check it out. This game is a clear labor of love and a game that I enjoyed despite its many flaws. If you love the original Stalker games like I do, you'll most likely love this game too, but for new players it's likely to be a different story. Stalker has always been Fallout for Chads. The battles are more extreme, the environments are more extreme, and the bugs, I mean anomalies, are more extreme.
Нет, быть такого не может.
Это реквием. То, что ты видишь, реально. Ты видишь действие, созданное твоей способностью. Но тебе ни за что не достичь того момента.
S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 is a game that's continued the trend of half-broken games released 2 years too early, but unlike many other games, it isn't vapid and uninteresting, and is certainly not devoid of character. I actually plan to do a future playthrough on the highest difficulty with no HUD. I enjoyed the game that much, but there were some times where my frustration with the game and its problems made it necessary for me to take breaks. I think the best way to describe the game is simply in terms of pros and cons. I want to give you guys my honest opinions on all facets of the game, and then you can decide whether or not you want to play it. What's going on, guys? It's your boy Drinker here, and today we are reviewing S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 Heart of Chernobyl. Before the video begins, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, all that good shit. It really does help the channel grow a ton. We're very close to getting the channel monetized, and every little bit of support goes a long ways. Also, consider checking out my locals if you wish to support me more. Now let's go ahead and jump right into the video.
Я бачу квіти у твоїх очах. Я бачу літери на стінах, які ховають мою печаль. Я блимаю, пірнаю вниз, здуваюсь, повертаюсь.
The game looks amazing when it's functioning. It's not the best looking game out there, but it can genuinely look stunning when you're wandering around the map and exploring the zone. The map is massive, with tremendous exploration and a world full of depth. There are many times where the next encounter feels almost scripted because the developers took the time to study the next most obvious path that you would take from point A to point B. It feels extremely organic and hand-placed and not procedurally generated. Everything feels like it was designed with a clear purpose in mind. Despite this, most of the game still somehow manages to feel organic. Mostly because you're forced to stay engaged and focused, or you can die before you know it. The world is huge. Traversing it can actually be annoying at times because of how far you have to walk, but in general, the world is spectacular. S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, more like Walker 2, am I right? The game just drips with atmosphere. The world design is brilliant. The charm of the old games is still mostly captured here. If you played the past Stalker games, some of the recreated areas have been wonderfully recreated in Unreal Engine 5. The raw cinematic quality you are presented with can truly make your jaw drop at times. The full dynamic day and night cycles are amazing. The crazy weather effects are just awesome and really make you feel like you're in an apocalyptic zone. The emissions look sick and terrifying. I don't know about you guys, but if the sky turns blood red, I'm probably not going outside either. The world is extremely dangerous and immersive. The game still feels like S.T.A.L.K.E.R, which I never would have thought would have been the case given the state of modern releases. The feeling of loneliness, abandonment, and exclusion is extremely amplified in the world. The environmental storytelling is exquisite. The world itself becomes a character. The emptiness you feel increases your resilience. You are often alone with only you and your next goal in mind. The solitude just amplifies every moment. The environments definitely feel more hostile when you're alone in the dark. The narrative, which we'll discuss later, is intriguing enough. Not great, but enough to keep you entertained. But the narrative has never been the main reason to play S.T.A.L.K.E.R. You play S.T.A.L.K.E.R to get immersed in the world, and as we discussed, the world is extremely immersive.
Don't you think you're a little bit too immersed into this game?
Нет!
Learning the world and organically figuring things out is the strong point of the game. The gameplay loop is generally, I need info from a man. He asks me to kill one of two men. I kill both because I'm an overachiever. I go tell the first man, who then immediately betrays me. I kill him and his crew and loot their stuff. I didn't get the info I needed, but I did get some money from selling their loot, which I used to buy alcohol and sausages. It's your typical Eastern European business transaction. The gunplay feels tremendous. They look good, sound good, have good recoil feedback, and the animations, especially the jamming animations, are very good. When a gun jams, it just adds to the intensity of the fight. It makes things much more interesting and engaging. Much like the previous S.T.A.L.K.E.R games, weapon degradation is a serious thing that you have to pay attention to, and repairing and upgrading weapons is extremely critical when you can afford it, which you rarely can. This is probably the easiest game in the series, which is both a pro and a con. I think it's mostly balanced well because the human NPCs typically aren't too much of a challenge, but the mutants seem much deadlier. The bloodsuckers and Chimera in particular seem much scarier, probably because of how quickly they appear and attack you and how quickly the bloodsuckers go invisible. The Chimera are just absolute resource waste, taking a ton of damage, and the mutants kill you so fast it's actually silly. The bloodsuckers are probably more common than they should be and end up being more of a nuisance once you get a handle on how to fight them. The humans do have very good aim and will laser you if you're in the open, but that's nothing new for S.T.A.L.K.E.R. It's probably the most accessible game in the series. It does more to explain things to you than the previous S.T.A.L.K.E.R games, but it still doesn't hold your hand and generally holds the principle of letting you learn and discover and figure things out for yourself. I love that the S.T.A.L.K.E.R series doesn't hold your hand and kicks your ass if you're stupid, but rewards you for doing simple, calculated strategy. The missions were brought back and they're still super deadly. They don't happen all the time, fortunately, but being in an open area far away from cover when a mission starts is definitely an oh shit moment. The autosave system is much better than the other games in the series, but you'll still want to save scum. Just like the previous games, I heavily encourage save scumming. This game is extremely challenging, but also extremely rewarding. The guided fast travel system is back, but oftentimes it's hard to get to a base that has one. You do unfortunately spend a lot of time walking around the map over encumbered, and just when you lost some weight, you get rewarded with a new gun that adds even more weight to your inventory. The human NPCs in close quarters try to flank you and use their weapons correctly. Shotgunners try to get close. ARs stay further away. They also try to lob grenades into your location. It's not as grenade spammy as the previous games, but they still have perfect accuracy on grenade throws. When the AI is working, it makes the fighting feel much more realistic. The mutants and the animals are more reckless and act like how you'd expect a mindless animal to act. Again, it adds to the realism. The factions fight each other and you can choose to third party them or try to skirt around them. You find NPCs fighting wildlife, and you can even use anomalies to your advantage in a fight and get your enemy to kill themselves in an anomaly. All of this helps the world feel more alive and helps make you feel like you're just existing in the world trying to get by. I have to say I love the addition of the death counter on the save file. It's very humbling to look up and see 50 to 60 deaths on your save file. There's also a ton of Easter eggs, which is a nice touch. From their previous games to Call of Duty to Dark Souls, it feels really nice to include these. The game mostly does a good job of staying out of modern politics, however it's definitely more diverse than previous games. Not an egregious amount, but enough that an extreme noticer like myself couldn't help but notice. And of course there's the allegories to the Ukraine war, but overall I don't really have many complaints there. The game is also pro-alcoholism, which, like I said in my review of the older games, alcohol is the solution. It wouldn't be an actual representation of Slavic culture if you weren't chugging vodka like it was water. After all, it heals radiation.
Громадяни, слухайте новини. Вночі над містом Яготином пролітала чудернацька куля. Синя, як на лобі гуля.
This game runs like Stephen Hawking. I did not get to finish my first playthrough. I had multiple crashes, including a blue screen that corrupted all of my saves in a game where I was like 35 hours in. I had side missions break and I was never able to complete them. The game runs badly. There was a big patch that has helped a lot, and a few more, and it should probably be in a pretty solid state. Modern gaming. Wait 2 years for all the major bugs to be fixed, and the game will be ready to go. I saw several comments along the lines of, oh, I can't wait for this game in 2 years, because people know most modern games aren't worth playing at launch. Now, GSC Game World has never been known for making games that run well. The original S.T.A.L.K.E.R games still run poorly to this day, but hey, it could be worse. Bethesda could have made this game.
Another settlement has sent word that they need our help. I'll mark it on your map.
Must have been the wind.
He must be close by. I'll check it out. Okay, we're good.
The game is 150 gigs. That's a pretty bloated download, and you can tell the game isn't well optimized as we discussed before. It's another modern game that was released in early access, but we're paying for the full release. There are constant lighting issues that happen throughout the game, from light flickering to full-on seizure-inducing strobe light issues. The light sources also don't seem to be properly calibrated, oftentimes giving off less light than they should. There are many dark places that you can't see anything in. This game should have included some night vision like the previous S.T.A.L.K.E.R games. There's a ton of pop-in issues with wall textures. Some buildings are hard to spend any time in because of how much the walls flicker. The sound bugs out a lot. There are many times where talking to someone on the radio, their voice sounds compressed by a radio channel, then the last sentence is super clear like they're suddenly standing right next to you. The sky bugs out and flexes and bends in weird ways. It can really be the entire edge of the screen, but it's mostly notable in the sky. There are so many bugs that it will legitimately be years before they are resolved, if they ever fully are. Never mind, there are no bugs, only anomalies. Every time you start the game, you have to spend 5 minutes compiling shaders. It's extremely slow and annoying. I'm not sure how they managed to make a game where it has to compile the shaders every time the game is launched instead of remembering the shaders, but they did. The AI is not as good as it was in past S.T.A.L.K.E.R games, probably due to the switch to the new engine. It seems like the A-Life system that they've used in the past is in the game, but it's so broken you can't actually tell. Apparently modders have been able to fix some parts of it, which is how we know it's there for sure, but it's legitimately so broken people didn't know if it was there. There are many times where enemies are completely brain dead, or don't react, or spawn right on top of you, or spot you through walls. There's definitely a lot of times where the enemies spawn near you because you triggered some sort of event. Like I said before, when their behavior is correct, it really adds to the immersion, but it just doesn't happen all the time. You do sometimes get noticed through walls and through bushes. Now, at first I was thinking that this was a bug, but it's actually the enemies hearing you. Sometimes it's probably a bug. Now this is conflicting for me because sometimes enemies don't notice you getting into a gunfight one room over, but then they hear you walking towards the door. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not a big deal overall, but it can be really immersion breaking. The game also doesn't really tell you to watch out for how much noise you make, but then again, S.T.A.L.K.E.R doesn't explain much, period. The AI also seems to know where you're at all times. Their eyes and ears are amazing, maybe a little too amazing. I routinely get spotted by people I can't see when I'm making little to no noise. It almost feels like they're cheating at times. I like the challenge the game presents, so it's not a huge deal, but it could probably be tweaked. For the most part, they are dumbed down a lot, and there's a lot more standing in one place and not trying to flank you than in past games. The mutants basically full sprint at you in a straight line. This is definitely a downgrade from the previous S.T.A.L.K.E.R games. Stealth is basically impossible in the game though, with how quickly they see or hear you. I mentioned this as both a pro and a con. Some of the mutants are insanely strong and just huge resource dumps. The Chimera in particular can take about 10 full mags worth of bullets and a couple of grenades on top of that. They're just absolute tanks, and it's frustrating that they can kill you almost instantly. The bloodsuckers, while not as strong, are still insane to deal with as well, and I think it's funny how the game throws one at you immediately. There are survival mechanics in the game, but food and drinks and meds are generally in abundance, so you don't typically notice the survival aspect of the game. Sometimes you get caught in a rare spot where you don't have the item that you need, but it was extremely rare, and I usually had so many I was selling the rest. Part of this is due to just the fact that I'm a loot goblin who refuses to leave a single drop of precious loot behind. The carry weight is immersive, but I'm always over encumbered. Why'd I have to play so much Fallout in my past? I have to hoover up all the good loot because I can sell it. I will slowly drag it across the entire map for all those extra shekels. I actually got stuck in this loop quite a bit, hoping for a mission to take me back to a base, preferably with a guide so I could sell stuff and then just fast travel to where I wanted to, but for long stretches of time I was just over encumbered. Mouse acceleration is on by default, and you have to alter the game files to change it. There's no in-game option at the time of recording. This is a large oversight because at times it makes aiming just feel awful on mouse and key. There's certain aspects of the game that feel like they were built for console. Anytime I see a weapon wheel, that's usually a dead giveaway. I've heard that rebinding keys is also a mess, but I play on the standard binds, so I didn't test that.
Там, де гори, полонини, водограй і водоспад, ресторацією відкрили у самім серці Карпат, місце файне парадове.
Now personally, I'm not a fan of Unreal Engine 5. Most games that use it generally feel soulless and all feel the same in Unreal Engine 5. This game is actually somewhat unique and manages to feel distinct, but it's definitely the exception to the rule. Games in Unreal Engine 5 often feel like impressive technical demos, but have a lack of style and personality to them. You can generally tell which games are using Unreal Engine 5 just by seeing one screenshot. When I see that a game is going to be on Unreal Engine 5, all I can think is, man, this will be a generic but beautiful, horribly performing game. What good is photorealism if you experience it at 14 frames per second? In general, I don't care how pretty a game is. It's a nice bonus. I care about how the game plays. Fortunately for S.T.A.L.K.E.R, the graphics enhance how immersive the game is, but this isn't always the case. I'm not a gamer that's obsessed with graphics. In fact, I find the graphical obsession many gamers have to be a little silly. It's a nice perk, but I care about the other facets of a game far more than the graphics. You basically have to rely on upscaling and frame generation with any Unreal Engine 5 game, and this game is really no exception. So you have to sacrifice the quality that Unreal Engine 5 offers just to make the game more playable. Now, more and more studios are going to use Unreal Engine 5, be it for the ease of use and having more people that are trained to use it versus some random specialized engine, or saving money on building their own engine, or saving money by not retaining staff and hiring contractors, or just achieving that photorealism that we discussed before. Call me crazy, but I'm not a fan of outsourcing for cheap, practically slave labor. Whatever the reason is, it's concerning for the issues we've discussed, as well as UE5 is owned in large part by China. This means that games will have to adhere more and more to Chinese censorship and data collection. I could see a future where Epic and Tencent own a part of the vast majority of the games out there. It's already getting to that point. Giving more access to an evil empire doesn't exactly fill me with hope for gaming in the future. Unreal Engine 5 seems to be turning video games away from art and turning towards the trend of making games mass-produced slop. There's also a lot of censorship that happens with language in Unreal Engine 5. I'm not educated enough on the subject to know if it's built into the engine or if it's just the devs pushing their own narratives, but it's highly concerning either way. Based on their own documentation, it seems like it's built into the core of the engine. Hopefully my concerns with Unreal Engine 5 end up not coming to fruition or end up improving over time, but only time will tell.
Коли сіло сонце і закінчилася туза, жаль не розуміє, що це є для мене.
The last thing I'm going to discuss is the narrative of S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2. Now, while the main story isn't great, it is at least entertaining enough to keep you invested. The main reason you stay invested is due to the choices you have throughout the game, both in the main and side content. There is variability in outcome depending on what you choose. The English voice acting is not very good.
Hey, would you look at that?
And the dialogue and writing are not great as well, which obviously doesn't help the voice acting, but the English voice actors don't even have Slavic accents in this game, which is extremely disappointing. Overall, the English voice acting direction feels like maybe it was rushed, or more of an afterthought. Much like the other S.T.A.L.K.E.R games, getting immersed in the world is more important than actually experiencing the narrative, but the narrative in this game is at least engaging. You play as the main character Skiff, who encounters an anomaly that destroys his home. Now before this, artifacts had been retained only in the zone. This is the perimeter surrounding the Chornobyl power plant. Skiff wants to know why the artifact appeared outside of the zone and in his laundry basket, and find out who was responsible for the destruction of his home. This takes Skiff on an adventure in the heart of the zone, meeting new people with different goals and different views on the artifact, as well as different views on the zone itself. There's even flashbacks to S.T.A.L.K.E.R from the first game, and S.K.E.R, the player character from S.T.A.L.K.E.R Clear Sky, returns as well. This of course helps with the continuity of the world. Now, your decisions affect the world around you, and you can tell that they all have major implications and impacts on the world. Again, the story is not the strong selling point of the game, but it does make you think about your actions, and you will look at characters differently depending on the story moments. My main issue with the story, besides it not being the best, is you feel more like a main character in this game, which was never the case in the previous games. In the previous games, you felt like just another person trying to survive in the world, but every main story mission in S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 gives off main character energy. Now again, the story is a continuation of the first game, and many of your questions about what happens next are answered here. If you were a fan of Shadow of Chernobyl, then the lore here is probably a gold mine for you. S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 Heart of Chernobyl happens to be both beautiful and a disaster at the same time, but in my opinion, the positives greatly outweigh the negatives. This will be a game that I put an unbelievable amount of hours in as time goes on, and that is something I can't say about many games. That being said, of course, there are still many patches that need to happen to make the experience much more enjoyable for the player. This game should have never launched in the state that it was in, and at the time of recording, it's still in rough shape, but the performance has improved a bit. Despite all the issues with the game, the core of the game was so good that I think you should consider playing it now instead of waiting a year or two for the problems to be fixed. Obviously, I understand if you want to wait, but personally, I think the game is worth playing even in its current state. If you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, all that good shit. Comment down below letting me know what you think or what else you want to see from me in the future. Check out my locals if you want to support me further. As always guys, this has been your boy Drinker, and I am out of here. Peace.